every single area, right down to the bloody hinges, to make it as light as possible, and the result is a laptop that weighs under a kilo. So it's considerably lighter than that MacBook Air 13, despite the fact it sports a bigger display.
You can use the new stem splitter feature and the new Logic Pro 2 app for iPad that actually looks incredible if you use Logic on the iPad. But the most interesting new thing to me about M4 is something that they didn't really talk about. They kind of glossed over it. They didn't really dive into it in the keynote, and they don't show it on their website very clearly.
Welcome to the Lucas Tech Podcast, your ultimate guide to the world of technology. Every week we dive deep into the latest tech trends, groundbreaking innovations, and the stories behind the gadgets and software shaping our future. Whether you're a tech enthusiast, a professional in the industry, or just curious about the next big thing, we've got something for you. So, plug in, power up, and let's explore the tech universe together.
This past week, I've been getting to know Huawei's fresh new MateBook X Pro 2024. It's an unfeasibly light and compact laptop that basically whips out its danglies and gyrates them in the general direction of the MacBook Air, screaming, "Hey, what you reckon, eh?" Of course, just like the MacBook Air, the MateBook X Pro 2024 ain't exactly cheap. It'll drain your savings by approximately £2,000. So, is it worth that cash? Well, here's my in-depth review, and for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do poke subscribe and ring that notifications bell. Cheers! Now, the most striking thing clearly about the MateBook X Pro 2024 is just how stupidly dinky it is. It's been redesigned in pretty much every single area, right down to the bloody hinges, to make it as light as possible, and the result is a laptop that weighs under a kilo. So it's considerably lighter than that MacBook Air 13, despite the fact it sports a bigger display. And it's not actually until you have it in your hands that you can really truly appreciate just how ridiculously good Huawei's design is. At its chunkiest point, it's around 13 mils, and honestly, this thing slides effortlessly into pretty much any backpack out there, even my kid's Disney backpack. And yes, it is light enough for her to lug around all day in said Disney backpack. I mean, what's the point of having kids if you can't put them to work? Now, the MateBook X Pro 2024 sports a magnesium alloy frame, and of course, it gives off some serious MacBook vibes. But that is just at a quick glance. There are actually plenty of differences, starting with the soft touch surfaces, both here on the interior and also the exterior, the lid and that bottom end. So very much unlike the hard, cold finish of that MacBook, the MateBook actually feels nice to hold and to use and to stroke if you're into stroking laptops. Our velvety interior certainly feels very nice against your palms. You got a small selection of different colours with the MateBook X Pro 2024. Basically here in Blighty, black, white, or this here blue model, which I think looks rather smart and sleek. And the matte finish on that lid means it doesn't get too smudgy when you are lugging it about the place as well. Not too many grimy, greasy fingerprint shenanigans. As for the port situation, well, sadly, rather slim pickings there, just like a MacBook. You've got a pair of Thunderbolt ports here on the left edge, and just a regular bit of USB-C over on the right, and that's your whack. No full-sized USB-A ports, of course, because of the skinniness of this laptop. Certainly no HDMI ports, as you hopefully expect, but of course you can use those Thunderbolt ports to output to another display if you want to, and there's no memory card slot on here either, which is a bit of a miss. When you want to actually use the Huawei MateBook X Pro 2024, just lift that lid and literally a second or so later you are into your desktops courtesy of that super swift facial recognition. But if for whatever reason your face is having a very bad day, well, no worries, you've also got a fingerprint sensor built into that power button as backup, and again this will get you right into your desktops in a jiffy. Now, another highlight of the Huawei MateBook X Pro 2024, and there are quite a few, is that 14.2-inch display. Now, this is a flexible, scratch-resistant OLED display, now thinner and lighter than the previous MateBook X Pro model. Got a 93% screen to body ratio thanks to the reasonably skinny bezel surrounding that display. And it's a 3:2 aspect ratio as well designed for creative tasks, web browsing. You can get a good bit of multitasking with two apps side by side, all that kind of shenanigans. It's not quite as well suited to gaming or, of course, kicking back with a good bit of Netflix or whatever. If you're watching some cinematic fare, you get pretty big letterboxing. Some nice thick chunky black bits above and below the actual action. But hey, those movies will look absolutely lush thanks to the 3.1K resolution, 3120 by 2080 pixels. So video, photos, everything looks pin sharp and absolutely stunning. Reasonably poppy color reproduction. You got full support for the Adobe RGB, sRGB and P3 gamut, so good news if you are editing some photos or video. And if you boost the brightness to the maximum levels, you'll probably get a migraine after about 5 minutes because it is eye-searingly bright. I'm not content to simply leave it at that. Huawei has also slapped on a 5-layer coating to help significantly reduce reflections. So I've got the brightness scaled all the way down, as you can see there. I'm now aiming the display at my fiercely, ferociously bright spotlights, which I've got just behind me. And as you can see there, you can barely even see that light reflected in that shiny panel. And of course, if you boost up the brightness, you've got absolutely no chance. It actually seems to be on a par with that Gorilla Glass Armor display that Samsung slapped on the Galaxy S24 Ultra. So yeah, boner time. And yes, it is a touchscreen as well, so you can poke and prod that display as merrily as you like. Although Huawei has somehow managed to cram the biggest possible touchpad into that palm rest, literally stretching all the way down to that bottom edge. And for laptop touchpad, it's actually not CAC. You've got full multi-touch gesture support, all the usual shenanigans. It's reasonably responsive. My only real complaint is occasionally a little bit my palm will just accidentally brush against that bottom edge and load up something that I didn't mean to load up or whatever. But back on the media chops, the Huawei MateBook X Pro 2024 also boasts larger speaker chambers than the previous model, 6 speakers in total. So watch this one with my wife from the sunny state of Goa in Western India, drinking coconut rum. Oh, God. Sorry, I can't even think about coconut rum without bringing up a bit of breakfast. So as you can hopefully hear there, max out that volume. The audio's pretty punchy, certainly more than loud enough to clearly hear what is going on, even if you're in quite a noisy household. I'm pretty happy with the Huawei MateBook X Pro 2024's keyboard as well, which practically stretches the full width of that chassis, just leaving a wee bit of space either side for those speaker grills. No real surprises with the design or anything. It's your typical chiclet style laptop keyboard. Those keys are a good size, they're reasonably well spaced, so they had absolutely no issues touch typing on this thing at my full rate. A couple of fairly standard laptop keyboard complaints like the single row enter key, which always gets on my tits. Got a couple of stages of backlighting, which is more than good enough for tackling the evening workload. Or of course whatever you happen to be up to at 3 AM. It's a pretty firm board overall and reasonable travel as well, again considering how ridiculously skinny this thing is. Now squirreled away in the reasonably skinny top bezel of the MateBook X Pro 2024, you'll find yourself a full HD webcam with, as you can see there, a dinky little LED light just to indicate that it is in action when it's being used by any app. And you do actually have a physical privacy switch over here on the right edge as well, so you just give that a quick flick at any point and that will completely disable the camera just in case you want a bit of privacy, just in case you want to do stuff with absolutely zero risk of anyone seeing, whatever that might be. And because the Intel processor which runs the show here on the MateBook X Pro 2024 has a built-in NPU, that means you've also got various AI-powered camera features, including automatic framing, which can just make sure that you are the center of attention. As you can see there, just zooming in on my gorgeous baldy bonce. There's also an eye contact tool which doesn't actually do what it's supposed to do, which is make it look like you're actually paying attention to the screen when you're staring off at your Kindle or cat or whatever. Just as weird looking things to your eyes, makes it look like you're an anime character or something. But then you do have background effects which can blur out everything behind you too. Varying degrees of success. Occasionally it goes a bit wonky, as you can see there. The Huawei MateBook X Pro 2024 also boasts a quad mic setup, so even if you're sat quite far back from this laptop, it'll clearly pick up on your vocals, and it does an alright job of sort of drowning out any background shindiggery that's going on, trying to drown you out a bit. Now, when faced with a laptop this stinky, you'll be forgiven for thinking it's probably about as powerful as a butterfly's bowel movement. But actually, performance comes courtesy of one of the fresh new Intel Core Ultra 9 chipsets, and that maxes out at 40 watt TDP. On top of that, you got Huawei's Super Turbo Resource Management. So this laptop basically powers up instantly, it's ready to use within seconds. Those apps load up instantly as well. You can happily multitask with loads of different apps at the same time and see absolutely no slowdown whatsoever. And while there's no dedicated GPU on here, the graphics are handled by a bit of Intel Arc action. The MateBook X Pro 2024 can happily handle photo editing, video editing, and other creative tasks. So in the likes of DaVinci Resolve, for instance, the Huawei MateBook X Pro 2024 can export a 1-minute YouTube Shorts and TikTok video in roughly 25 to 30 seconds. And that, by the way, is running on battery power with a whole bunch of other apps, including Chrome and all kinds of stuff running in the background. And while the Huawei MateBook X Pro 2024 certainly isn't built for gaming, that absolutely does not mean you can't get some gaming on the go if you fancy it. When it's plugged in and slapped on that performance mode, the likes of Forza Horizons runs at a pretty stable frame rate around 50 FPS. And that's on the high graphics settings. So again, it's frankly ludicrous performance given the ridiculously dinky wee size of this thing. And if you want to do a good bit of video editing, bit of gaming on the go, whatever, where you've got a dual shark fin fan setup, and these have actually increased in size over the previous model with a fresh intake design and a literally hot bit of quad vent action. You've also got a vapor chamber packed in there, and I've got to say that even when this thing is under extreme pressure...
Alright, so I've been using the new M4 iPad Pro for like 2 weeks now. Been doing a lot of the same stuff I did with my M1 iPad Pro from 3 years ago, watching YouTube videos, browsing the internet, answering emails, listening to music, and spoiler alert, it's almost exactly the same experience. The M1 iPad Pro was already super overpowered and very smooth and snappy and had great battery life. And this one now, even more so of all of the same stuff. Not a very helpful review, I know, but I've also been thinking about some of the really interesting decisions that Apple made with this iPad specifically. Some stuff that wasn't like even really in the rumor mills, it kind of just came up, didn't even show up in the keynote, but is unusual and different. So these are 5 of the most interesting choices that Apple made with the iPad Pro. So first of all, the new iPad Pro is thinner. We all knew that. It was already an interesting decision because I kind of felt like we were done with that a few iterations ago, like nobody was asking for thinner iPads, but maybe they saw all the gushing over Samsung's Galaxy Tab Ultra. Guilty, that thing is also ridiculously impossibly thin, so iPad goes from 6.4mm, which was slightly thicker than Samsung's flagship, to now 5.1mm, which just barely beats Samsung's number. Now, I'm not trying to start any beef that doesn't already exist. I'm sure if you ask Apple, they'll just say, look, it's the thinnest Apple product ever, which is already nuts. It's crazy thin. But I think it really feels like Apple is just looking for something to make this different, make it feel different from the last couple of generations of iPad. And now there's rumors that they may also be doing this to next year's iPhone. Just going with thinness. Honestly, it is noticeably thinner and lighter to me, someone who's held the previous one quite a bit. Definitely less of a difference when you have a case on it, but this is also going to naturally mean there's less room inside the iPad. But weirdly, somehow, the 11-inch iPad Pro M4 has a larger battery than the last generation 11-inch iPad Pro. And this new, bigger 13-inch has like a tiny bit slightly smaller battery, almost the same size battery as last year. And so what you end up with is a really good battery life again, awesome standby time, really good battery when you're actually using it. But what strikes me is Apple could have made, if they made this the same thickness as last year, they could have made an iPad with an enormous battery life. With the efficiency of the M4 chip, it could have had some insane long battery. Or they could make something strikingly thin and have the same rock-solid battery life as always, but I would have loved to have seen option 1. But anyway, there's also a few other things missing from this tablet as well. So they avoided saying it during the keynote, but they got rid of the ultra-wide camera. Not a huge deal at all, obviously. They kind of have a huge cutout for the LiDAR on the camera square. It still kind of looks like it's maybe a dual or triple camera setup, but nope, single camera, LiDAR, and a flash. And I was also curious if magnet paper could reveal anything new about the insides of this iPad. This is before Jerrig everything like tore his apart, but I know instinctively if you make something thinner and smaller, and the speakers have to suffer, right, that would be smaller. And magnet paper, fun fact, is a great way not only to see the magnets inside of a device, of which there are many here, but it also shows the iPad Pro has these new, much more circular quad speaker drivers as opposed to the more rectangular looking ones from before. I've listened to them back to back, this one versus the last generation, and this one is a little bit less bassy. Still loud, still some of the best speakers in any tablet and very usable, but physics, so less room inside, a little bit less bassy with these new speakers. Now, packaging-wise, not a lot has changed. I mean, an iPad box is still an iPad box, but two things. One, no stickers anymore. So, sorry Apple fanboys, if you were hoping to keep collecting environmental things, no more plastic. They're trying not to ship so much stuff. But the thing is, okay, they are still shipping these two things with every iPad. If you get a space gray iPad, you get a black cable, so the USB-C cable, but you also still get a brick with every iPad. Fine, but it's this white 20-watt charging brick. Which, okay, I know they stopped shipping a brick with the iPhone, and they could use the same logic and stop shipping a brick with the iPad, but they're still going to ship you a brick. And if you do, with this $1,500, $2,000, $2,500 iPad, could it at least be a good brick? Could you at least give us the fastest charging the iPad can support and maybe even match the color of the cable? Maybe. But anyway, maybe that's nitpicking. Hopefully not though. But let's talk about this computer thing. So the knock on the iPad Pro for years now has been that it's a ridiculously overpowered, amazing piece of hardware, but it's still an iPad. Like, it still does basically the same set of things that an iPad Air does. There's a couple little things like pencil hover and little stuff that it's basically the same. So they're not going to let this turn into a full-fledged computer because Apple has Macs to protect. So it's kind of stuck as an overpowered iPad. And with this generation, well, yeah, it's still kind of true. Again, this is the first time Apple is unveiling the newest generation M4 chip, and it's only in this iPad Pro for now, but it's even more powerful at its peak. It benchmarks extremely well. It's a second generation 3nm process. It has a larger and more powerful neural engine as well. I mean, this chip is great, but as far as things that actually take advantage of that, the list is very short, and some of the stuff is even like coming later this year, like the new Final Cut app. It's just around the corner. So if you just do regular iPad stuff, watching Netflix, web browsing, all the classics, like, this is going to feel exactly the same, not just as the last M1 iPad Pro, but as an M1 iPad Air. You know, if you get this M4 version here, you can play those, one of the like 3 games that support the new hardware accelerated ray tracing on this iPad. You can use the new stem splitter feature and the new Logic Pro 2 app for iPad that actually looks incredible if you use Logic on the iPad. But the most interesting new thing to me about M4 is something that they didn't really talk about. They kind of glossed over it. They didn't really dive into it in the keynote, and they don't show it on their website very clearly. But, okay, in the past, when you're buying an iPad, all you really pay more for in a single iPad lineup is storage. Right? That's just, you start with, you'll be 128 gigs, kind of a joke, but then you go up in price and you just pay for more storage. and you can get different colors. And then a few years ago, very sneakily, we started realizing, okay, you actually also get more RAM in the highest end models. So if you buy more storage, you'll also get more RAM. So 8 gigs of RAM on the base ones, and 16 gigs of RAM on the 1 and 2 terabyte iPad Pros. But now, on this latest one, the stratification goes even further. Now it's also CPU cores. So first of all, the base iPad Pro is 256 gigs now, thankfully. And you go from an 8-core CPU to a 9-core CPU with the M4, but that's just with the base 2 versions. The top 2 versions get another performance core, so those are 10-core CPUs instead of 9. And then there's also the nano texture display option. And this is that matte finish one that I briefly got hands-on time with at the event. I haven't gotten to see it since, but it does look pretty impressive, even though I do have my durability concerns with it. But that anti-reflective finish is only available, again, on the top 2 options, the 1 and 2 terabyte iPad Pros, the expensive ones. So now, if you're buying a more expensive iPad Pro, you're getting different amounts of RAM, different CPU, different storage options, and different display options. Very computer-like, if you ask me. Now, the tandem OLED display, to me, is the most interesting thing about this new iPad Pro under the hood, but in practice, it's actually honestly just a bit of a brighter, more contrasty version of the same thing we've been looking at for years. A perfect example of the iPad's hardware outpacing the software is obviously a new OLED display. Would be great if you had like an all-black background and maybe showed just the time, maybe fed an always-on display. It could look super cool, but the iPad doesn't have an always-on display. I don't want to bet money, but I wouldn't be shocked if the next version of iPadOS did support an always-on display with just the Pros, because they have the OLEDs now. But it doesn't. We gotta wait till WWDC and then maybe we'll see it there. But I mean, aside from that, it still has less blooming for just like the perfect HDR content with pitch black blacks. I love to see that. If you're just watching regular SDR content though, or just doing any number of regular tasks, watching Netflix, browsing emails, or web stuff, I mean, you won't notice much of a difference unless you're in direct sun max brightness. That's a testament to how good iPad Pro displays have been for years in the past though. Now for your artists out there, they've also got this sweet new pencil. No, the back still does not act as an eraser as much as I wish they would do that, but the rest of this thing is better than ever. It supports Find My now. It has a new squeeze sensor inside for selecting different tools. Super intuitive. I started using it immediately. It also has a new haptic motor inside, so you can feel this little click as you squeeze, which is a nice little confirmation. Kind of surprised they didn't add this earlier. And then it supports barrel rotation for a few tools that specifically change when you rotate the point. And look, it even has this fake shadow. So this is not a real shadow of the Apple Pencil. This is a fake, totally unnecessary, computer-generated shadow that's shown on the iPad's display.